Welcome to the video for Lesson 4-6 Day 1 Notes. We're going to talk about subtracting expressions today. So in order to do this, we're going to look at the column and fill in the opposite column. So if you'll remember, in the beginning of the year, we talked about opposite. When we had subtraction, we switched it to add the opposite. So we're going to recall those skills when we're looking for the opposite of the terms that we have here. So when I look here, the first thing I see here is a 1. The opposite of 1 would be, so I write the negative 1 there. The opposite of 3 would be a negative 3. The opposite of a negative 7 would be a positive 7. The opposite of x would be negative x. The opposite of 3x would be a negative 3x. Now, the opposite of negative x minus 7, we have to think about taking the opposite of each of these terms. So the opposite of our negative x would be x, or 1x if you prefer, because remember, when we just have an x by itself, that implies that there is a 1 there. I'll actually do the same thing to up above there where we have the negative x. I'm going to sneak in a 1 there, so it's a negative 1x. So we have a positive x, and then the opposite of negative 7 would be positive 7. So the opposite of negative x minus 7 is x, or 1x, plus 7. The opposite of 3x minus 7 is going to be a negative 3x, because the opposite of 3x is negative 3x. The opposite of negative 7 is a positive 7. So the opposite of 3x minus 7 is negative 3x plus 7. Okay, let's look at the next column. Same idea here. So the opposite of 9 minus 3x. So we're going to do the opposite of each. So the opposite of 9 would be a negative 9. And the opposite of negative 3x would be a positive 3x. So the opposite is negative 9 plus 3x. Now 3y minus 11. What do we think? The opposite of 3y would be negative 3y. And the opposite of negative 11 would be a positive 11. So the opposite of 3y minus 11 is negative 3y plus 11. Next one, negative 4h minus 22. The opposite of negative 4h is 4h. The opposite of negative 22 is positive 22. And we'll keep going. The opposite of 65 would be a negative 65. The opposite of 5k would be a negative 5k. So I'm going to rewrite this as negative 65 minus 5k. The opposite of negative 6w, 6w, positive. The opposite of a negative 1, the opposite of a positive 1 would be a negative 1. So 6w minus 1. The opposite of an 8x minus 7/10. So the opposite of 8x is negative 8x. And the opposite of negative 7/10 would be a positive 7/10. So the opposite of 8x minus 7/10 is negative 8x plus 7/10. Last one, the opposite of negative 3y minus 1/2. So the opposite of negative 3y would be a positive 3y. And then the opposite of negative 1/2 would be the positive 1/2. So the opposite of negative 3y minus 1/2 is 3y plus 1/2. Okay, so let's look at some examples where we subtract expressions. So I'm going to zoom in to number 1 here. We're going to start at number 1. Example 1 is showing me that we have 2x minus 4 grouped together, and then I'm subtracting this 5x plus 2. This subtracting, now in the previous videos I've talked about how we just had like an imaginary 1 out front here that would be distributed and wouldn't change anything. But in this example, I actually have a negative 1 out front here. So that negative 1 is going to change what's inside of those parentheses. So to do this multiplication then, to eliminate this, I can't just say, oh, well, we're multiplying by 1, nothing will change. We're multiplying by a negative 1. Multiplying by negative 1 does change something. So we're going to set up an area model. And in my area model, I'm going to put the negative 1 on the left side. And then I'm going to put the 5x above that. And then next to the 5x, in the other box, I'm going to put the plus 2. So we know to fill these in, we're going to multiply the sides. So negative 1 times 5x is a negative 5x. And negative 1 times 2 on the side there, so negative 1 times 2. Negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2. So when I rewrite, now this one I didn't have to set up an area model for because I'm just multiplying by a positive 1. So I will still have 2x minus 4 from this parentheses here. But then the other one will change to a negative 5x, so minus 5x, and a negative 2, so minus 2. Now that I've done this distribution, now we're looking at, we just need to find combining like terms, just like we've been doing. So looking through, and the first thing, we start with our x's to keep it in standard form. So I see a 2x minus 5x. So 2x minus 5x gives me negative 3x. And then I'm looking for more like terms. I see a negative 4, and I see a minus 2. Negative 4 minus 2 gives me a negative 6, so that's a minus 6. So my answer here is negative 3x minus 6. And then go ahead and put a circle around that answer, negative 3x minus 6. Let's look at another example. Okay, number 2 here, we have 4y minus 4, and then I see this negative. I snuck a 1 right in there so that I know this is a negative 1 being multiplied by the 5y plus 11. So when I have this negative 1 on the outside and I need to multiply the inside, I'm going to bring over a box so I can set up an area model. So I put the negative 1 on the side with the 5y and then the positive 11. To fill in the boxes, I'm multiplying negative 1 times 5y. Negative 1 times 5y gives me negative 5y. And then next to that, I have a negative 1 times 11. Negative 1 times 11 is a negative 11. So then I can go ahead and remember, this has an imaginary 1 out front, but 1 times 4y minus 4 will not change anything. So I'm just going to bring this all down, the 4y minus 4, and then my answer from inside the area model, which was the negative 5y, so minus 5y, and then the negative 11, so minus 11. Now that I have it all written out like this, I'm looking for like terms. Starting with my x or y, so variable, in this case I have a y, so I'm going to start with my 4y first, and then I also have a negative 5y. So I'm going to highlight 4y and negative 5y. In your calculator, remember you cannot put variables in, but you can do 4 minus 5. 4 minus 5 gives me negative 1y. And then I have my constants. The negative 4 and the negative 11 are both constants. They can go together. So in my calculator, negative 4, you can either do minus 11 or negative 4 plus a negative 11. Either way, you'll get the same answer, which is negative 15. So my final answer is negative 1y minus 15. Remember, you could also write this as a negative y without having the 1 in front, and that would be an equivalent answer. So either way is fine for this one. And then just add your circle around that. Okay, example 3. Okay, number 3, we have 6x plus 10. There's a 1 out front, but that doesn't change anything. But here, this negative is very important. Remember, that's like a negative 1. I'm going to sneak my negative 1 in there. When I have a negative 1, I do need to bring over an area model because multiplying by negative 1 will change the what's in the parentheses there. So then on my area model, I put the negative 1 on the side and the 10x on the top, and then the minus 8 on the other side. So on the along the top as well. So negative 1 times 10x gives me negative 10x, and then the negative 1 times the negative 8 gives me a positive 8. So I actually have a positive 8 in that box. Okay, so then we rewrite in this first one, we have the 6x plus 10, and then bring down the negative 10x plus 8. So I just wrote them all out right in one line so that you can see the 6x plus 10 comes from above here, and then the minus 10x plus 8 comes from the area model. Now it's like what we have been doing. We're looking for like terms starting with the variable. So I have a 6x first, and then I also have a negative 10x. Remember, you want to make sure you highlight the sign that is with it as well. So 6 minus 10 we can put in our calculator, and that gives us negative 4x. And then when I look back, I see I do have constants as well. I have a positive 10 and a positive 8. 10 plus 8 is 18. So then we have our final answer, negative 4x plus 18. And then just put a circle around that answer. So my secret message here on example 3, so for the secret message, I want you to put a smiley, straight, or sad face to show me how you feel about distributing the negative and combining like terms like we've been doing here to show subtracting expressions. So how are you feeling about subtracting our expressions? So again, that's a smile, straight, or sad face in example 3. All right, on to the last example. Okay, example 4, we have a 22x, and then we're subtracting the negative 5x minus 15. So again, because I see that negative in front, I'm going to put a 1 there. And that negative 1 in front of the parentheses, meaning it needs to be distributed, will change. So I need to bring over an area model, and I do need to multiply the negative 1 times the negative 5x. So the negative 1 goes on the side, and then on the top we'll put the negative 5x and the minus 15, negative 15, so that we know what we're multiplying. So to fill in this first one, we're going to do negative 1 times negative 5x. Negative 1 times negative 5 is positive 5, and then we have the x. And then for this side, we're multiplying the negative 1 times the negative 15 for this next cell. Negative 1 times negative 15 is a positive 15. Okay, so then we're going to go and write this all out. So we started off with the 22x in front that I haven't done anything with yet, so I need to bring that down. Then I have from the area model the plus 5x and then the plus 15. Now that I have everything written, I can just look for like terms. Like terms, I see variables first. 22x plus 5x. 22 plus 5 we can put in our calculator, and that gives us the 27x. And then we just have the constant by itself. Remember, I like to highlight all of them just to know I didn't forget any terms. So I have the plus 15 that I'm going to put at the end, 27x plus 15, and that is my answer there. So put a circle around that. All right, hopefully everything went okay in this video. We'll do more in class. Have a wonderful night.